Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Grid Live Wrap-Up. I'm Kobe Lambeth, and with me, Ben Snyder from Grid Live Encore and NASCAR.info, Joshua Birch from Joshua Birch Motorsport, and making her Grid Network debut, big welcome to Nicole Fry from Fans and Focus Media. Nicole, welcome to the Grid Network. We're so excited to have you join this amazing team.
Thank you so much. It's really exciting to be here tonight.
Yeah, you're definitely going to have a lot of fun. We really enjoy doing these shows each and every week. And a big thank you to our awesome Patreon investors, Colin, Deshelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew. You can invest in the Grid Network by clicking on the link in the video description or do a one-time investment through Buy Me a Coffee or YouTube Super Chats. $10 by Super Chat or Buy Me a Coffee, and we'll mail you some of our Grid Network stickers. And be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon. And now I'm going to throw it over to Ben so we can start off by recapping Formula One's Saudi Arabian Grand Prix in Jeddah.
Thank you, Kobe. And I echo Kobe's comments, of course. Nicole, welcome to the team. Happy to have you. Now, despite a 5-second penalty for Sergio Perez, Red Bull still dominated the race, as they often have in recent years. Max Verstappen led from the start, only losing the lead for a brief moment after a safety car for Lance Stroll when Lando Norris stayed out of the pits. Verstappen is on 9 consecutive race wins since Japan last fall and 19 of the last 20. He'll be going for his 10th consecutive win again in Australia on the next race weekend. Since May of last year, Max has led every lap in a race 7 times. So, Nicole, we'll start with you. Had we not had the safety car, would this have been just another race where Max had led every lap and had been an absolute Red Bull dominant performance like we've seen so many times from them since the last couple of years?
Absolutely. I wish I could say that wasn't the case. I wish I could say something exciting would have happened and someone else would have taken the win. Maybe Norris given the opportunity, but I think without a doubt, Red Bull has just built a rocket ship this year, and Max is just such an amazing driver that no matter what you do, sometimes I think he's just going to end up on the top of the podium, whether we like it or not.
Yeah, Nicole, I don't really have much more to add there. This was just another, Red Bull performance by Max Verstappen, and this was just, just what they do. No matter what is thrown their way, whether it's stuff happening on or off the track, Red Bull still finds a way to go out there and completely dominate the competition. So nothing we saw on track this weekend surprised me at all. And this is probably going to, unfortunately, be the story of this 2024 F1 season, just like it was last year. This is a Max Verstappen and Red Bull world, and we're just living in it.
Should we start singing Barbie Girl? Might actually give a bit more fun there as well. I said when they came across the line, pretty much predictably, Max Verstappen wins. And we had him in the fantasy, we had him in our pick a winner. It was just one of those races where as soon as he was out in front, it was his day. I was hopeful Perez might do a bit more. Alonso looked promising at the start, and Leclerc dropped back quite quickly. So, yeah, Red Bull was so good, and they would have had the dominance. That safety car gave us a few laps of Lando leading. So we'll keep an eye out to see whether McLaren bring this mysterious pace that they claim to have found in pre-season. But in the first few races, the upgrades will start coming by the time we get to the 4th round at Japan, which is strange because we don't usually see a lot of upgrades there. So that's going to make that race even more entertaining. I can't wait for Japan and Shanghai being back on the calendar.
I saw a comment from Lewis Hamilton, and to his credit, he was very gracious in defeat. I know it's been a difficult couple of years for Mercedes ever since he and Max Verstappen had that epic battle in 2021, but basically saying that, Michael Schumacher had his dominance with Ferrari, I had mine with Mercedes, and now Max is getting his with Red Bull. But I mean, it is very hard to look at this and not acknowledge that even when you think about those periods of dominance, we still have not had a situation where the winner is this predictable. And, to be on 19 of the last 20 races and have the same guy standing on the top step of the podium every weekend, I mean, it's something that we've never seen before. And, again, all credit to Max Verstappen. He's immensely talented. Red Bull has built him an absolute rocket ship. But for the sake of the sport, you do hope that we can get a little bit more parity and at least see some of these other top teams like Ferrari, McLaren, and Mercedes fighting for race wins at the top step of that podium. Now, let's talk about Lando Norris, who did get up and lead a few laps off sequence there on pit stops, but ultimately did not have the pace to hang with the Red Bulls. Many suspected that he had jumped the start, and George Russell was the most prominent of those, voicing his displeasure on the radio. Now, the race steward said that there would be no further action since the car's transponder did not pick up the movement. So, Kobe, we'll go to you first on this one. Regarding such calls, should video evidence be considered to overrule a transponder's lack of picking up a movement on a start like that?
Absolutely, Ben. I think it's important, in any sport to use all the tools necessary that you have. And, Formula One can't say that they don't have video evidence of this. And I feel like, that I guess, kind of like when you're watching football or NBA and about, we're going to send it back to New York, to like look at the video evidence and all that. I think Formula One could really benefit from these situations, to make sure that they're getting all these calls right instead of, just saying, that there's no further action because the car's transponder did not pick up this movement. I feel like that they should be able to utilize all the resources that they have, because we know Formula One is very technology. They have a lot of technology, and they have all this stuff at their fingertips. It's just a matter, whether or not to use it or not.
We're in our third season now since 2021, and I remember a couple of weeks after the race when Mohammed bin Sulayem stood in front of that podium and said, "We are introducing a brand new VAR style system for Formula One based here at the FIA offices in Geneva, where we can send the data back and have support to the race control system and the stewards to make sure that all systems are right." Where is that system? Because that was the clearest jump start we've ever seen. I said it when the lights went out. I noticed it when the lights go out. And anyone who knows how I do it, I look at the lights and I'm looking at the cars. As soon as that fifth light comes on, I'm down on the cars. And I noticed that Lando got a terrible start. He bogged down. Only then when we saw with George did we see he jump the start. He jumped it. Now in MotoGP, they've been very much on jump starts for a number of years. What they have is on each row of the grid, they have CCTV cameras that are linked back up to race control. And during the start, there is a live image on the lights that's relayed to every single camera, like a side-by-side that we do here with our TV pictures. And that's lined up with each row. So you can see if the light's on and the rider's moving, and then they go out. We've got onboard cameras in these cars. We should be able to see that. So in my opinion, yeah, we should be having the video overruling the sensor, because with that sensor, for instance, when we speak, the microphone here, that's picking up a nanosecond after I've said the words. That's how a microphone works. So the sensor that's underneath the car isn't registering until it's in full motion. He stopped in the box, so it's not going to register that he's moved away from the line because the contact patch is still there. Imagine you've got a bit of Velcro and it's solid, put together too. If you tug at it, you're moving the Velcro, but it's still stuck together. It's the same for a sensor. You're not breaking that contact line. So we need to have a backup system, because it was embarrassing. Everyone knew he jumped the start. Even Lando said he jumped the start and he got away with it. So yeah, very weird in my books.
Yeah, it's absolutely unfortunate that the stewards didn't take another considerate look at this, given that we could all clearly see, plain as day, that there was something definitely not right about that start in Formula One, especially when we do have so much advanced technology within the sport at so many different levels, even within the car to the garages and everything in between. The fact that it seemed like didn't even go back and reconsider looking at this was kind of disappointing. For years, I think we've been saying that a lack of consistency among rulings or penalty calls in Formula One has been a massive issue, and it starts when the lights go out. And to see such a massive, seemingly oversight is really disappointing.
Well, we're going to follow up on this in just a moment. First, I understand we have a comment or two from the chat room. If we could bring those up. There we go. From Adam, welcome, Nicole, and you're in good hands with Kobe, Ben, and Josh tonight. And Ali Behrman with a top 10 finish. He'll be in F1 soon. What a drive. Absolutely. I think pretty clearly the driver of the day, and that was reflected in the vote as well. I think he got close to 50% of the vote or something like that. It was a tremendous debut for Ali Behrman. Now, a follow-up to this, Nicole and Josh, we'll go to you on this one. Should the FIA and F1 revisit this rule? Is this something worth taking another look at to prevent such an incident in the future?
Oh, 100%. Absolutely. I mean, when you have so much tech at your disposal, so much insight, at least having the ability to say, okay, we saw something funny. Why don't we just go back and just consider taking a second look, something that will tell them that, maybe something isn't right and maybe something needs to be reconsidered, I think is absolutely needed in the future.
In about 2006, 2007, I was at Curry's PC World as well, which is a computer store for those of you who don't know. And they were selling toys. And I was brought a Cyberman door sensor for my birthday. And that detects when anyone goes by and it goes, "You will be deleted," and all that from Doctor Who. I'll happily give it to the FIA because clearly they need some form of better sensor. That Cyberman could do a better job than the race control could during that race. So yeah, they'll look at it. And the FIA just at the moment, I think, sadly, it's the least of their concerns with what's happening with the FIA at the moment.
You would think technology would make these calls more accurate, but Josh, you brought up VAR in the world of soccer. I know that certainly hasn't solved every refereeing problem over there either. So it is quite astonishing sometimes how we have all this technology in place and yet we still can't get these calls right. But we'll leave it there. I'm sure we'll revisit this sometime in the future again, based on what I was just saying about how common these things seem to come up. Let's revisit something that Adam just brought up in the chat. Ferrari has achieved something pretty special. Granted, we have the caveat, it is still pretty early in the race, but they have 3 drivers currently in the top 10 in the driver's standings there. Oliver Bearman finished 7th in his first F1 start with Ferrari, filling in for Carlos Sainz, who was out this weekend with appendicitis. Now Leclerc, Sainz, and Bearman are all in the top 10 in points at the moment. Bearman actually has more F1 points than F2 points because he couldn't compete in Formula 2 this weekend due to getting the call-up. So, Kobe, we'll go to you first here. What do you make of Bearman's maiden race weekend in Formula 1, and does this put him in the running for a full-time seat in 2025?
Absolutely. What Oliver Bearman did this weekend was simply spectacular. I'm still in awe that he was able to do this and to get points on debut in a Ferrari. Been a young kid like him. Imagine, you travel to Saudi Arabia and you're like, I'm going to try to get my Formula 2 season off on the right foot. And then you start off the weekend, you're like, yeah, things are great. And you wake up one morning and you're like, hey, you're going to be racing in Formula 1, something totally unexpected. And been a young kid, this is a lot to take in, especially driving for such a prestigious brand like Ferrari. But he handled it just as well as anyone could have done. Didn't put a wheel wrong at all during the race, and just did exactly what he needed to do. He had some great battles with Yuki Tsunoda earlier in the race. And just simply just had a really good day. I think this is a performance that Ollie Bearman certainly has to be extremely proud of. I know everyone was really excited and happy to see his proud father looking on from the garage area. Such a really kind sight there. And I do believe that this is going to put him in contention for an F1 seat in 2025. Probably going to be one of the Haas F1 drivers next year because, obviously you're going to see Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton in Ferrari in 2025 and for the foreseeable future. So unfortunately, there's not going to be a role for Oliver Bearman at Ferrari, but I could see him going to Haas next season.
Bearman had one of his worst weekends in Formula 2 in Bahrain. That Prema did not take to the circuit at all. They were struggling all weekend long, and he had a battle with his teammate Andrea Kimi Antonelli. Of course, he's got all eyes on him at the moment because the big rumor is that he's taking over from Hamilton at Mercedes. Of course, his manager Toto Wolff, it all sort of lines up how quickly they've rushed him through the ranks as well. They wanted him in for 2027. He now could come in 2025. That's how big he's having to adjust. And Antonelli got the better of him last week, and then Bearman stuck in on pole position in F2. Woke up thinking, okay, I've got the sprint race today. I'm starting in 10th. I'll see what I can do with a good race on Sunday in a feature, get some decent points. Oh, no, I'm racing in Formula 1 and Ferrari. Oh, dear. And the way he took to it was like a duck to water. It was fantastic. And he did not look out of shape one bit. And the difference between him compared to that of Nick de Vries when he did it in the Williams, he didn't have to be helped out the car. Bearman jumped out, hugged Hamilton, hugged Russell, went up and was like, well done, team. Well done, everyone. Beautiful drive. And I agree with you, Kevin. He'll be in a Haas next year. Sad it is a Haas, but there's no other Ferrari cars. Now that Sauber will be taken over by Audi. So they're running Ferrari engines, but they'll be running, I think they'll be running Audi, won't they? Well, what are they going to be? They're coming in as a PE manufacturer as well, aren't they? Can't quite remember. Was it Merc engines? One of the two. But they won't. There's no room for him anywhere else.
Yeah, I think that was basically as perfect as a first weekend for any future Formula One or hopeful Formula One driver could ever possibly have. The way he just was ready to go, honestly, I think surprised everyone. We've seen so many amazing drivers struggle in the past to adapt to a Formula One car. And whatever Prima is doing, whatever Oliver Behrman is doing F2, obviously he has some great trainers and a great team around him, because the way he was able to step into that role so suddenly at like such a important time and a big track. Like, this is a difficult track that he participated at. It was really amazing to see him have a wonderful weekend. And I think given just the stagnant nature of Formula One at the moment and just the repetitive nature of the winner we've seen for the last 2.5 seasons, it was nice, something different on the grid. And it's also very heartwarming to see someone who people have been talking about for years as a future Ferrari driver and really one of the great generational talents, be able to actually come up and perform like everyone was expecting, if not better than everyone was expecting this past weekend.
Yeah, well, as Josh mentioned, it's been a dreadful start, or was a dreadful start for Behrman in Formula 2 in Bahrain. And of course, looked like he was in prime position to pick up some points this weekend, but of course got the call up, and we'll have more on the F2 race weekend on tomorrow's Encore show, so make sure you stay tuned for that. Now, another big talking point coming out of this race was time penalties. Kevin Magnussen had 20 seconds worth of time penalties. He stayed out and essentially held up the back half of the field to allow his teammate Nico Hülkenberg to collect a points-paying finish. Sergio Perez, meanwhile, picked up a 5-second penalty for an unsafe release, but was well ahead of Ferrari and kept his second-place result. So, Nicole, is this within the rules as intended for time penalties? I know that those have come up in discussions again over this offseason, or does there need to be a change where the penalty has more immediate effects, such as actually giving the position back when something like this occurs?
I have no issue with the way the rule is written now, mostly because I think part of the fun of watching people get penalties as a fan in Formula One is the fact that the way people can absorb those penalties, whether that is just having it added on or having to take an immediate pit stop or even potentially giving it back to their opponent, is kind of left up to choice. And it provides some very interesting strategy questions that each of the teams and each of the drivers handle differently. And I think the biggest concern is, at least in the past, has been the lack of consistency about giving penalties. So in my book, as long as they're consistently handing out the exact same time penalties for the exact same reasons throughout races this season, then I think people will come to get used to it. And at the end of the day, it's not going to be as big of a discussion or as a talking point that we've seen this weekend. I think this weekend was just kind of a harsh wake-up call to some of the new standardization of time penalties. And after a while, it will kind of all seem like water under the bridge.
Of course, Netflix can then make it look like it was on for about an hour, which is what they did with Hamilton when he got that 10-second penalty for taking Verstappen out at Silverstone, and Netflix were on for like 50 seconds in the pit stop as well. So Grosjean was actually only in the car for 15 seconds. It was 2 minutes 35 as well. We were thinking he was stuck in the car. Box to box, really do need to get a hang of that. But yeah, I think I like the way the penalties are coming through. I think it, as you said, Nicole, it's better. It's easier to understand. With drive-through penalties, sometimes it could be barely anything, because if you say you wait and just say you drive through for you get 3 laps to do it, and say you're in completely clean air, you're not going to lose a position. Whereas with the time penalties, it mandates you are going to lose positions. You are going to run the risk of having a safety car, and then you have to come in, stop in the pit lane, and either serve that time penalty, or you add it to the race time, which effectively automatically puts you to the back. Happened with Magnussen. So it allows strategy to come into play where Magnussen held up everybody and Hülkenberg was able to get P10. So I like that. I picked him in the fantasy league, Hülkenberg, so that was fine. But it does create the good strategy, and it creates a little bit more fun in what at the moment is a championship that is, I don't want to say the expression, but I think there's nothing better than flogging a dead horse at the moment. We're just sort of like coming week in, week out, expecting the result to change. That's a neurological condition. We tune in week and week thinking we're going to see a different result. Nothing's going to change for a long time. But yeah, I like the penalty system. It works. When it doesn't, like Lando.
Well, another point that I was just going to bring up, Josh, was I don't like how you can get 10 seconds for taking out an opponent, but apparently you get 20 seconds for running an extra cooldown lap like Dorian Penn did in the second F1 Academy race.
Do you know, I have looked back time and time again. It's not her fault because the FIA have put a board directly where the checkered flag is. So when you're waving the flag, you can't see it from the cockpit. And even worse, it was windy. And the person waving the flag didn't do what I would do and properly wave it, just went up and down. So it's blowing straight in the wind, going up and down. You couldn't see it. And then by the time she came around for the second lap, they weren't there. They'd all left the race control building. So there was no one there to press the red flag button. There was no one there to tell them already. It was a complete mess. And to be fair, I don't think you should be given a penalty for winning the race twice. It's not on. It's the FIA's fault. And that should be a sporting penalty or a financial penalty, not something that affects her on track for their stewarding mistakes. Honestly, it's ridiculous.
Oh, and Josh, I have a question for you on this. Can Mercedes potentially appeal this penalty given to Dorian Penn, or have you heard anything about that? Or is this something you can't appeal? Because I think this is something, if they're able to, this is something that they should be able to appeal, because I'm still upset over this Dorian Penn penalty. I didn't think it made any sense. It's just ridiculous to just take away a win just like that over something, it just seems really silly to just take someone's win away just because of that.
There's two things. There's two sides. There's a case where you can say you couldn't see the flag, and there was no, like usual, we see flags and that lot around the circuit. There was nothing. So there was no flags around the circuit. There was no yellows or reds or anything. There was no cars slowing down because she was first. And by the time she got right around, because it's such a long lap here, 6 kilometers, everyone was already back in the pits. And the other two were still behind her for Abby pulling, and I can't remember who finished in third. So they hadn't got there yet. So it really, there's a way that they can say, they can appeal it up to 30 days after. So yeah, but the FIA can then reject that appeal by saying, yeah, but look here last year, because in Formula 2, we had a guy do exactly the same thing, and we gave him a race ban. So you've got off lightly here. So I don't know, it's give and take, but there's no consistency. Race ban, 20-second penalty. Doesn't make sense. So I reckon they should appeal it. They've got 30 days to do it.
Absolutely. I hope they do. I think it was definitely a harsh penalty that everyone was so incredibly shocked. It sent ripples through Twitter, I know, incredibly quickly when the news came out. And to see such a harsh penalty given, I think, especially so early on in the season, when there is potential room for having like a massive appeal that could easily be justified. I'm surprised that it wasn't just a discussion that they had with the team, or maybe a fine that they had for the team. Seeing a win taken away from a young driver who dominated the weekend was really unfortunate. And hopefully this is a learning moment for the FIA and for Formula One Academy and all of the drivers. We'll definitely have to kind of keep a close eye, I think, on how those teams are treated in the future when it comes to potential penalties like this, given that the drivers are essentially at the F4 level and they're still very much in that phase of learning how to do all of this driving, especially on such a big stage as they accompany Formula One around the world.
All right, well, we'll have much more on this on the Women in Motorsports show later this week. And again, I can only echo what everybody said here. It seemed to me at most a reprimand would be a penalty that may be justified. This crime here, if you can even call it a crime, because to take a race win away for simply essentially running an extra cooldown lap is just absolutely ridiculous to me. But we'll have more on that later in the week. As for right now, let's go ahead and jump into a quick lightning round and continue recapping the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. So now those teammates down in 17th and 18th, and then Lance Stroll crashed out in 19th. Pierre Gasly had an absolutely miserable night in 20th. So of those four, Kobe, who had the most miserable weekend as a whole?
I'll have to say Pierre Gasly and Alpine. It seems like, Alpine is on fire right now, and not in a good way. Yeah, I know after the season started, they continue to make some changes within the organization. And if you've had all off season to make these changes, and if we made it to the start of the new season and you're still making changes from within, that's very telling of where your program is. Pierre Gasly didn't have a great race. in Bahrain, then get to Saudi Arabia, and then the car has problems at the very beginning of the race. Very, very frustrating. We know what Pierre Gasly is capable of. Him and Esteban Ocon, just have not had a great start to the season at all. But I think Gasly certainly has to be the most miserable.
Absolutely. My pick is also Gasly. I think it's brutal not to be able to finish a race. It's even worse when you can't even make it through the first lap of the race. And to see the pace of Alpine and just know that regardless, even if he was able to continue the race, he probably would have finished dead. It's brutal.
All right. Well, this was our 4th time at this Jeddah circuit here. Do you think that this is a circuit that you're going to look forward to in the future, or is it one that you maybe feel differently about? Nicole, we'll start with you on this one.
For me, I think it depends on where it will end up in the calendar in the future. The last couple of years, it's been exciting because it's been the second race, and we're still not used to seeing how these cars and how these drivers and how these teams perform. And given that this circuit at Jeddah is so incredibly technical and tricky, it's a difficult race, especially, again, at the beginning of the season. So I think if it remains at the first half, 1 or 2, 3 races of the season, it will be exciting to watch, and I'll look forward to it. But if it continues to kind of maybe drop down into maybe mid-season, I think it will be very forgettable.
For as long as we've got it, I agree with you, Nicole. I want it in the first 3-4 races of the season, Max, because it's this type of circuit that gets you excited about going back to street racing, because it's very technical. And with brand new cars, you're bound to see a few errors. I'm just glad it's not race 1 as what we nearly had for next year, because Australia is returning as the first race of the season. Ideally, it'd probably be Australia, Bahrain, Saudi, then off to Japan and China, is what I'm hearing is the early draft. So I quite like that it's sticking early season, because it works better, in my opinion. It didn't work in 21 when we shoved it right to the end of the calendar.
All right, on to the battle between McLaren and Mercedes. Oscar Piastri is only 2 points behind George Russell in the standings right now. Of course, it is still very early, but Kobe, can Piastri outperform Russell as the season goes on?
That's a tough question, because it seems like McLaren and Mercedes are very close right now, especially in the constructors. But I'm going to go out on a limb, and I think Oscar Piastri can get George Russell this year and beat him in the standings. But it's going to depend on McLaren's development of this car throughout the season.
I would agree. I think Oscar definitely has a really good shot at beating out Mercedes in a multitude of ways. And I think it will kind of depend on how consistently he has a good car and a good race. Only time will tell, but it will be an exciting battle, I think, to see.
All right, then finally, Leclerc did take home the point for the fastest lap. Do you think that the Ferrari will have the pace when it comes time for the races to catch Red Bull this year, or will Red Bull just continue to run away with the championship? Nicole, what do you think?
I wish it wasn't true, but I think Ferrari is going to run away with this one again this year. As much as I would love in my Tifosi heart to say that would not be the case, if they get anywhere close to Red Bull this year, I think it is going to be a shock, and we will just have to wait and see.
Yeah, like I've been saying on our previous shows, I know it's early in the 2024 season, but I'm sorry, guys, but it's over. It's time to start looking forward to the 2025 season. I don't think Ferrari or anybody's going to catch Red Bull this year. Max Verstappen, Red Bull, congratulations on your championship. We'll see you next year.
I'm genuinely considering learning Dutch just so I don't have to say the same thing again of Max Verstappen wins, because it's getting boring. I've said it 57 times in the past 67 races or something silly like that. It's getting boring. I think Max has got the most... Max has won more races in the past 3 years than he did in his entire F1 career. I mean, that's an easy stat to say about, but Max has won more races in the past 2 seasons than he did in his entire Formula 1 career. That's how scary it is and how big the calendar's getting. There is no real possibility. We have literally got the possibility that he could win all 24 races, plus the 6 sprints. If Max does that, I think he's better than Fangio if he does that, 110%.
Yeah, well, Verstappen, only 26 years old. Of course, he already has 56 wins in his career, like you were mentioning, Josh. So, of course, nobody thought Lewis would break Michael's record of 91. I don't know if Max can continue this pace. Lewis's 103 might be in jeopardy before we know it as well. Red Bull have been absolutely dominant. And again, hopefully we could see Ferrari get up there and start to challenge them, or McLaren or Mercedes, or even Aston Martin at this point, whoever it is. But I'd have to probably agree with all of you. I think Red Bull probably have this one in the bag, and we can start getting excited for 2025 and 2026 from here. Now we have a weekend off for the F1 teams, with a long haul to Australia is now underway. Red Bull, again, like we just mentioned, looks to have sole possession of first place in the constructors, pretty much sealed up. Ferrari is in second, but third is McLaren by 2 points over Mercedes. Again, we know the battle up front may be one-sided, but the midfield battle is certainly heating up as well. So, Kobe, 2 races in. What teams and drivers stand out for the right and the wrong reasons when you look past the domination of Red Bull?
Well, I'm going to start off by talking about McLaren. Just talked a little bit about that. I think the McLaren looks really good to start off the season. I think Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri could have a really strong year. And as I was saying, potentially, challenge Mercedes and the constructors. And I also want to give a call out to Haas as well. Been able to score a point in the first 2 races. And I remember on the Formula One roundtable show, it seemed like everybody thought Haas would not score any points this year. And see, they've already proven us wrong here at Grid Network. Basically, Alpine is running how we thought Haas would run right now. But yeah, I think Haas has certainly surprised quite a few people in these first 2 weeks. We'll see if they'll be able to score more points throughout the season. And I also want to point out Daniel Ricciardo and Yuki Tsunoda from the VCARB team. And I really expected a lot more from this team to start off the season. And it really seems like, that they're really struggling right now. And I know Tsunoda and Ricciardo had that little run in, and then, they sat them down and talked out, and they didn't have the results at all in Saudi Arabia. And Daniel Ricciardo, he's probably feeling a lot of pressure to perform, because he really wants to return to the senior Red Bull team and replace Sergio Perez in that car. But if the results are not going to be there in this VCARB machine, and Sergio Perez, has a much better season than the last season. Trying to get closer and match Max. The Red Bull seat, the second car for next year, it could still be very much up in the air. A lot of people, just assume, that Daniel Ricciardo is probably going to be the front runner, but things are not going well for that team to start off the season for Tsunoda and Ricciardo.
Remind me, everyone, was Alpine running pink this weekend? I couldn't tell. I mean, we should have guessed that their car was bad as soon as that was announced. If they're saving weight by not having any paint, then that car is slow. And it is... I'm trying to think of... that car is worse than what we saw the Virgins in 2010, when they didn't have a fuel tank to get to the end of the races. That's how it's worse than that, because they have invested so much money. Alpine, who only have the Renault engines there, they've invested so much to try and go down a new route, and it hasn't worked. And they had a good car in 22. In fact, they had a great car in 21. Good car start 22. And it faded in 23. And now they've gone to a backmarker team. And they've got drivers that don't get along. They've got team principals leaving everywhere and said, I went through it. We've had Otmar Safnar go. Alan Permain's gone. Bob Bell's gone. We've had the 2 technical directors go. Alain Prost's gone. There's about 8 or 9 key personnel members. Alonso left. Piastri ran away. That's about 10 people that were so high up have gone in the space of 18 months. And it is just appalling. I do not think they'll be on the grid next year. I don't. The way this is going, Alpine will pull out, considering the highs they've got in the WEC Championship right now. And it's more relevant technology over in WEC with the hydrogen fuel cells. I will not be surprised if we lose Renault, and that will bring in Andretti and General Motors into the fold. That's what I think is going to happen. Has to surprise me, as Kobe said, to be up there. And special shout out to Ferrari. 2 podiums, 2 races, 2 different drivers, and as you said, Ben, 3 drivers in the top 10. Not every team can say that.
Yeah, it has been an absolute shock, I think, to everyone just to see how horrible Alpine have performed this season. I think everyone was so incredibly hopeful that with maybe a little bit of changeover, they would be able to kind of pick up their design pace a bit and actually produce some outcomes. To see them worse than Haas at the moment is truly disappointing. On the other hand, Haas has, it seems, outshone themselves with everyone's, I think, expectations of them this season. I know people were not expecting a lot. So to come in and to have a points finish so early on in the season and to have to push their car to their abilities and it's really nice to see. I also feel like we need to shout out Aston Martin a bit, because while I know they had an error Stroll putting it into the wall, Alonso, I believe, was what, P5? Like, that's a pretty strong finish for them so early in the season. And it's nice to see them at least kind of in that upper midfield.
Yeah, well, if you want an idea of just how evenly divided the top and the bottom half of the field seem to be, Nico Hülkenberg's 1 point for Haas is good enough to have them 6th in the constructor standings out of 10 teams after 2 races here. And a public apology from me to Haas. I predicted on our roundtable show that they would be the only team not to score a single point this year. I'm going to have to take that prediction back, obviously, because they have already after just 2 races. I think Alpine might be in that boat instead here, given what their car looks like. Certainly the biggest disappointment to start 2024, if you ask me as well. Well, Nicole, thank you so much again for joining us tonight. Welcome again to the team. And before we let you go, what is your one shining moment, the one thing that stood out to you most from this weekend of motorsports?
I think this weekend it would have had to been F1 Academy, International Women's Day, their very first race, and just putting on an amazing show, not only for the fans in person, but also I think all of the women around the world who have just been so excited to see them do well. It was an absolute pleasure to watch them race, and I think it was very exciting to see and to know that they have a very bright future ahead of them. Thank you so much for having me on the show as well. It was an absolute dream.
Great to have you here. Thanks again. And of course, much more on the F1 Academy race weekend on Women in Motorsports later this week, including the controversial penalty that robbed Dorian Pin of her victory in race 2. With that, we'll transition over to NASCAR. And Josh, thank you so much for staying up late for us and making yourself available for this portion of the show tonight. Take it away. Go ahead and lead this section.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here. And it was a pleasure to commentate on what has been 4 amazing NASCAR races to start the season as well. We're really in for a treat because we were at Phoenix Raceway, as you can see behind me as well, for the NASCAR Cup Series race. It was a dominant day for Toyota. The race had 6 different leaders, and 5 of those were the Toyota drivers as well. Denny Hamlin, Tyler Reddick, Ty Gibbs, Martin Truex Jr., and Christopher Bell all led laps, with Todd Gilliland in his Ford being the only driver to lead the race, not being that of Toyota. Now, Chevrolet didn't even lead a single lap, but in the end, it was Bell's number 20 Toyota pulling into Phoenix victory lane after stage 2 and stage 3 victories. Now, Ben, with this being the first race on the new short track rules package, did Toyota send a strong message to Chevrolet and Ford with such a dominant performance?
Well, normally I would say it's only been 1 race, let's be cautious and, not, make a blanket statement like that until we get a larger sample size. But given the importance of this race, that this is where we determine our champions, apologies to any newer fans who may have been tuning in for the first time this season and seen 3 incredible races to start the year. I know that this race was not as high of quality in the minds of a lot of fans, and that's been a struggle with the short tracks for the next gen package so far. It seems like this new package that they have certainly hasn't done much to alleviate that in the minds of a lot of people, but it is what it is. This is where we come back at the end of every year in a 1-race winner-take-all fight between the championship 4. Whoever finishes the highest of those 4, they're the champions. And if Toyota can make the championship 4 with their drivers this year, it looks like they're going to have a really good shot at walking away with the title in 2024. An absolutely incredible performance by them today. And Christopher Bell, I think I also saw someone on X/Twitter was saying that this is the largest margin of victory in the next-gen era. So, of course, we've only been in the next-gen era for a couple of years now, but still a statement win from him and a statement performance from several Toyotas today, getting up there and leading laps and showing how competitive they're going to be here in 2024 with this package, it looks like. So lots to look forward to if you're a Toyota fan. if you're hoping to see your driver walk away with some hardware at the end of the year, this was certainly a good step in that direction.
Is my brain wired wrong? I didn't like Las Vegas last week. I had to rewatch it to actually enjoy it. And then this week I've really enjoyed it. Now you're saying it was not a good race.
Well, I don't know, but I mean, Vegas, I think the 1.5 miles have been, generally speaking, much improved from certainly the last few years with the Gen 6 car and the 550 horsepower package with the giant fill-in-the-blank spoilers, as Dale Jr. loved to say. And yeah, I mean, I think the biggest strength of the next gen has been the 1.5 miles. So maybe I'm just looking at through those kinds of glasses there. But I thought last week's race was certainly preferable to this week's. I got to admit, I had a hard time staying invested here. Again, I don't know if that's just going in with the expectations of what the next gen's provided so far, but yeah, I got to say, for a Phoenix race, I thought it was fine. I didn't think it was a particularly bad race by any stretch of the imagination, but certainly not up to the standards of how NASCAR started the year, which I think has been a very strong start to their credit.
And I love being on here for these post shows because we've just got this through NASCAR. No issues in post-race inspection at Phoenix Raceway, and that's confirmed Christopher Bell as the win. It is official for him today, so that is the official results alongside us on the screen. No issues at all, which is what I absolutely love. We can bring you that information. So if Bell makes it to the Championship 4 again, based on the run we saw from him today, could he be one of the favourites to take the title in Phoenix? Because as you said, Ben, we're back here at the end of the year.
And if you think about how Christopher Bell's Championship 4 run ended last year in that Phoenix race, I think, absolutely, he is going to come back with a vengeance if he can just get to the Championship 4. Now, of course, that's a whole process in and of itself here. The playoffs are very competitive, and especially the next-gen era, we've continued to see a little bit more parity than we've been used to in recent years before that. So getting to the Championship 4 is going to be no easy feat. But if Christopher Bell can do that once again, like I just mentioned, with the strength that Toyota showed today, with the strength that Christopher Bell in particularly as an individual showed today with his number 20 team, he is absolutely going to be a championship favorite, maybe the favorite, depending on who else he would be matched up with in that Championship 4.
Now, we mentioned how Chevrolet didn't lead any laps today. Ross Chastain was the highest finishing Chevy driver in 6th position, the only Chevrolet in the top 10 as well. Many expected Hendrick Motorsports to have a stronger day. Chase Elliott looked strong early in the race, but he faded sadly back to 19th position in between teammates Will Byron in 18th and Alex Bowman in 20th. Bowman, personally, all day did not look like he had it. We were seeing him battling, trying high lines, trying low lines. He couldn't get a groove on. And even at restarts that we had, he was struggling to gain places. In fact, I think on 2 of the 6 starts we had, he lost places as well on those. And Kyle Larson was the best Hendrick driver, finishing in 14th position. But he was nursing a problem throughout the race, as we learned from pit road as well. So did you expect more from Hendrick today, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, anytime the highest finishing Hendrick driver is only 14th, I mean, yeah, you absolutely expect more from HMS. Now, granted, we've been talking all season, to start the year. I guess Alex Bowman had a great run. Daytona coming up just short of winning the race. But since he came back from his injury last year, since Chase Elliott came back from his injury last year, obviously those have been the 2 cars that haven't been up to performance compared to their teammates of Kyle Larson and William Byron. So to see them down in 19th and 20th, not too much of a surprise there. Byron in 18th, Larson in 14th, given their starts for the year and given what we just talked about. Yeah, I mean, that's certainly, we know a lot of drivers in the field would be happy with the top 20 drivers that, are driving for smaller teams that typically run towards the back end of the pack. But when you're driving for Hendrick Motorsports, the goal isn't just to finish in the top 10. The goal is to win. And when you're down in 14th and 18th place there, you're not really coming close to that. So, again, granted that this is the track where we determine our champions, you've got to think Hendrick, as strong as the start to the year that they've enjoyed through the first 3 races has been, they're going to want to go back to the drawing board and make sure that they can figure out this new package that we have here for the short tracks and specifically for Phoenix when we come back here to determine our champion in November.
Just want to pick up on one thing quickly as well before we go over the rest of the script. Joey Logano. Now, last week we saw, of course, he was in the news controversy with the glove and the webbed hand and everything. First time we're not running at a normal oval in terms of the half mile and the super speedways. We're running on a shorter track here. He suffered all weekend long ended up 34th, but before that, he was running way, way down the field, struggling to make overtakes as well, and he did not have a good day. Do you reckon that's a problem with this package for that car of the 22 squad?
Yeah, potentially. And like you mentioned, Josh, I guess you can say, you get caught up in an incident, it is what it is, but you're much more likely to get caught up in something like that when you're not running up towards the front, as Joey Logano is so accustomed to doing. So, again, very small sample size for this package, only the first race, but again, I can't drive home this point enough, given the importance of this racetrack in modern NASCAR. Obviously, if you make the championship 4, you have to come here and perform. And up until last year, you had to win the race. Ross Chastain put an end to that. I think that's going to be the exception to the rule going forward, especially in the Cup Series. And we've seen it a couple times in Xfinity and trucks before that as well. But yeah, I mean, Team Penske, that's another one that you have to look at, especially with Austin Cindric and his issue that he had earlier in the race as well. Ryan Blaney had a nice charge for the field. I think passed Ross Chastain actually on the final lap to finish in, what was it, 5th place, I think. So, yeah. Very solid result for him. But the rest of Team Penske and their Wood Brothers affiliate, Harrison Burton, I saw somebody posted on Reddit, I think today, if you had told me Harrison Burton wasn't in the race today, I would have believed you, because it seemed like he was, pretty much invisible out there. So, the rest of that program, when you look past the defending Cup Series champion, yeah, maybe there's some work to do over Team Penske as well.
I think we talked about every driver in the race today, bar one, Bubba Wallace. He was completely out of it today. He had a completely clean race. I was very surprised.
Especially given the strength of the rest of Toyotas. That was a surprise for sure, no doubt.
Yeah, when I got to him, when I was reading out the results and I got to him, I was like, we have not mentioned Bubba Wallace once today in anything. I was like, I'm really sorry, because we mentioned every other one. But another team that didn't have the best day was Richard Childress Racing. And of course, once again, as you mentioned, Austin Dillon was caught up in an early wreck that sent him back for the rest of the day, 32nd position. We saw him out on track for a little bit as well. It looked like he had a broken nose halfway through it as well. It did not look great. Kyle Busch didn't have the pace. He spun out in the number 8 team, is still making changes to the pit crew. He finished down in 22nd position, but was really having to take the ultra low line to even try and get up a couple of positions when we went restart racing. Are you a little concerned about what's going on at RCR?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard not to be. Especially when you consider the strength of the rest of the Chevrolet teams. Obviously, Hendrick had a great start to the year. Trackhouse picked up a win at Atlanta with Daniel Suarez. I guess Kyle Busch was right there, part of that photo finish as well. But yeah, I mean, a day like today, I mean, Kyle said, can you imagine this? Kyle Busch actually somewhat happy with a 22nd place finish on Twitter after the race, because he mentioned how much the team was having to change the setup, and I guess reckoned that it could have been a little bit worse than it was, even, being down in 22nd, pretty much a non-factor. And of course, Austin Dillon, again, getting caught up in an early wreck doesn't help, but there happens to be a driver at RCR's Xfinity program right now that is off to another great start to his year in Austin Hill. And, I hate to say it, but if anybody other than Richard Childress owned this team, I would think Austin Hill would be a prime candidate for the 3 next year. I don't think Austin Dillon has to worry too much about job security over at RCR, but, especially when you consider what Kyle Busch did last year. And again, I know that the entire team has certainly not been off to the greatest of starts this season as well, but yeah, I mean, the 3 team definitely needs a shot in the arm and improvement in terms of their race pace, especially because it's pretty clear who the number 1 driver is at RCR at the moment.
Well, RFK Racing was one of the 4 teams that had a strong result as well. Chris Buescher in 2nd, Brad Keselowski finishing in 4th position. They were carving their way through the field after pit stops as well and did really, really well with overtakes today. Stewart House Racing also saw Chase Briscoe get a top 10 finish. And I think my star driver of the day, Noah Gragson, a very, very strong run for him with 12th place, was running in 10th, but got passed by Reddick and Hamlin with about 5 to go and lost out as well. They moved up into 10th and 11th, Gragson down into 12th, but held off Suarez, who won that fantastic 3-wide finish at Atlanta 2 weeks back. Now, which team do you feel more confident about after 4 races, RFK or SHR?
I'm going to go with RFK only because, I think, again, take nothing away from Noah Gragson. I think he had another strong, solid performance today, especially given how low the expectations were for Noah Gragson coming into this year. Obviously, a dreadful 2023 that came to an end prematurely because of his suspension and release from Legacy MC as well. Coming over to SHR, a team that has certainly been on a downward trend. I don't think anybody was expecting him to have the strong runs that he's had the last couple of weeks. So a nice solid result for him today. But again, RFK, we were talking about how they needed a shot in the arm as well. It wasn't the greatest starts to them this season. Second and fourth, you can't do much better than that. So a strong performance for that team. I think they're finally starting to get things headed back in the right direction. And again, kind of been the opposite of SHR. I think SHR pretty solidly for the last several years was the number 2 Ford team after Team Penske. I think RFK, who have had a down period before that, really started to be on the upward trend again. They're probably now the solid number 2 team in the Ford camp behind Team Penske there, and SHR have dropped to a distant third, maybe even fourth, because again, Michael McDowell, I think top 10s are starting to become the expectation rather than the exception for that team. Front Row Motorsports, and again, Todd Gilliland, I know was off sequence on pit stops, but I think the only non-Toyota driver to even lead laps today. That's how dominant Toyota were. So, another solid showing for him. Front row really taking a step forward in the Ford camp as well.
Now, from the opening 4 races, it felt like we've had a complete reverse of the order. Now, we had different packaging today as well, different style of running races, but I honestly was in the comment box thinking, this is a role reversal to what we've seen for the first 3 races. So what were your initial thoughts on the first race with this new short track package?
I can't say I love it. It's a shame because the next gen, I feel like really, really improved the product on the 1.5 miles. I think with super speedway products, not bad right now either. I know there have been concerns over this new car with the safety aspect as well, but the short tracks and the road courses, as well, honestly, I think that, why do you think NASCAR added so many in recent years? Fans loved Sonoma. They loved Watkins Glen. The Roval was a big hit the first year or two. People wanted more road courses, and it's unfortunate that they focused, or at least appear to have focused on fixing the 1.5 mile products so much that after we added so many road courses, that and the short track package seem to have suffered the most with this car. So, again, it's certainly not encouraging to hear drivers after the practice session this weekend in particular talking about how, if anything, it seemed like maybe they took a step backwards with this package, which was supposed to improve the product. And again, I know people have soured on this track for a whole number of reasons. They don't like that you can fan out, heck, 8 or 10 wide on these restarts here. It looks a little ridiculous, but in terms of once we actually calm down from the restarts, even, I think the race still left quite a bit to be desired. I'm not saying it was an all-time terrible race that everybody's just going to forget, but given the strong start NASCAR's had to this year, and given what the drivers were saying in particular as well, I think lots of work still to be done with the next gen package, even in year 3 when it comes to the short tracks.
I almost did a Marty Reid at one point as well at the end of stage 1. The track confused me so much because it jigged itself back in 2019 to change the finish line. So I thought, oh, right, this is it. Oh, wait, there's another lap. So I startled it out as long as I possibly could. But I almost did a Marty Reid and called the lap of stage 1 early. So it confused me. So I don't know what the drivers are thinking because the pit road entry is now way off from where the exit is. It's a confusing track.
Yeah, it really is.
So we're ready. I'm going to now disappear, sadly, because I didn't cover IndyCar. I was in 25 laps total, I think, out of the 100. And I missed all the good bits because I think I missed every good bit. I'm going to have to rewatch the race tomorrow because I was covering the MotoGP, which is coming up later in the show, that Joe's recorded a segment for. Cracking opening weekend there with, again, a bit more predictability in it. So I'll leave you with Kobe and Ben, but my one shining moment from the weekend, it's nothing racing related. This weekend has been one of the most difficult we've ever done on JB Motorsports because everything that could go wrong went wrong. Tech issues across the board. We had 2 monitors literally blow up on us. We had TV pictures disappear mid-race. We missed one of the practice sessions because we had no internet. And it was an absolute mess. It has been a very long weekend. So I want to shout out 2 people, and 2 people who without this weekend, we would not have been able to do anything. Jess Ball and Josh T, who have done streaming and coverage. Jess especially, who's been in the box every day, same as me, who's led the F1 Academy race as well, and had to take over F1 sessions at moment's notice, and Josh for getting all the IndyCar days set up and brilliantly leading that with Adam. So without them 2, we couldn't have done this weekend, and that's my one shining moment. The amazing people that we all work with to get this motorsport coverage done, because it has been a very, very difficult weekend, and hopefully it's going to be smoother when we go forward. But yeah, if you ever want to see two monitors explode, just go back and watch them with my faces, because it literally went bang.
All right. Well, Josh, thank you again. And we'll see you tomorrow on Encore for Formula 2.
Can't wait. That was a good weekend as well. There's a bit to talk about there, so I'll see you tomorrow.
Especially given what one of the regulars did for Ferrari in the F1 race. Big weekend for that series.
I'll update you on that because he actually got pole. So there's a bit to talk about there. It was very confusing weekend for F2. I'll see you tomorrow, everyone. Take care.
Thank you, Josh.
All right, I guess we'll move into IndyCar now. Starting with the Firestone Grand Prix on the streets of St. Pete. It was a clean start for the IndyCar season opener. Christian Lundgaard had a puncture, but the first caution of the race came out on lap 27. Marcus Armstrong crashed into the wall, and Lundgaard was in the lead after pit stops. Josef Newgarden ended up losing the lead later on pit stops, but after a second caution, Newgarden took the lead again and never looked back after starting on the pole. And to put into perspective how dominant Josef Newgarden was in this race, it was a 100-lap race. Guess how many he led? 92 out of 100 laps. So Newgarden ended up leading all but 8 laps in a very, very dominant win. It looks like Newgarden was watching our recent roundtable episode to kick off the IndyCar season. He responded with a better qualifying. And I know our own Alex Anderson, said that Joseph needed to do better with qualifying. And Newgarden ended up getting, a street course win. His first win on a road/street course since Road America in 2022. So here's my question for you, Ben. Was today's dominant performance by Newgarden and Team Penske a bit wake-up call for Alex Palou and the other championship favorites? Should they be afraid?
Yeah, I think so. I forgive me, I don't know off the top of my head if we still actually award the trophies. I know there were road course and oval trophies named for AJ Foyt and Mario Andretti the last couple of years, but Newgarden would have run away with that on the ovals, obviously, last year. If he can figure out the road courses and the street courses as he did today, I mean, it looked like Joseph Verstappen was out there. I mean, it was just in a completely different zip code from the rest of the field and everybody else. If he can maintain this on street courses and road courses in 24, I mean, it's over. I mean, he's got the ovals figured out, obviously, and Penske's put a lot of effort into that. But, with the performance that he had today, Alex Palou is certainly going to come back very, very strong, I think. And there's a lot of talent in this series, but I think Josef Newgarden is this is certainly a statement win to kick off the year. And he's in prime position to make a run at once again, another championship over Team Penske.
Yeah, definitely. Josef Newgarden absolutely stomped the field today. It wasn't even close. There was nobody that could pass Josef Newgarden. The only thing that was going to stop Josef Newgarden today was a complete disaster in the pits or a mechanical failure. Otherwise, it was just smooth sailing all day long. Given how competitive IndyCar is nowadays, to lead 92 out of 100 laps, that is just insane and something you don't really see in IndyCar with all of the parity that we've seen. But I agree with you. It seemed like Joseph Verstappen was out there completely dominating this race. And I also agree with the fact that, Alex Palou and all the others are going to get up there. But as Josef Newgarden has figured out all the ovals, if he can keep this up on the road and street courses throughout the year, along with his oval dominance, the rest of the field, I think they really need to be concerned that this could be the year of Josef Newgarden and Team Penske. He seems very locked and loaded on the broadcast to say he's basically cut social media out of his life. I'm following absolutely everyone on there, and up in his workout routine, trying very hard to be locked and loaded. Yeah, Joseph has a couple of IndyCar championships and Indianapolis 500, now an overall victory in the Rolex 24, but he wants to get that third IndyCar championship. And looking at him today, I think Joseph certainly has the eye of the tiger, and that's a tiger that the rest of this field needs to be concerned about. And I believe we have a comment in the chat room. Adam Limmery says one word for an IndyCar race: domination. Absolutely, couldn't have said it better, Adam. And Jono82 said great result for the Bus Bros, Scott McLaughlin and Josef Newgarden. I can see these two battling it out for the championship this season. Totally agree with you. I think Scott McLaughlin could be in line for a great year as well. And moving on, we talked about him. Alex Palou started 13th in the race today and came home in 6th place. The highest finishing Ganassi driver ahead of Scott Dixon. Both Linus Lundqvist and Marcus Armstrong finished outside of the top 20 after getting involved in incidents. And Kiffin Simpson ended up getting a 14th place finish there in his IndyCar debut. So, Ben, are you surprised by the performance of Chip Ganassi Racing over the course of the weekend with none of their entries truly been in contention for the win today?
Before I answer, I just want to circle back to Newgarden real quickly and add one more thing. He moved up, broke the tie of Rick Mears 13th on the all-time wins list for IndyCar racing history today. Do you know that if you just track back IRL history to 1996, which is where we can trace back the modern-day IndyCar Series, he was third behind Scott Dixon with 55 and Will Power with 39 victories. So his 30 wins, at the age that he's at, still with a good portion of his career ahead of him. He is, maybe not as dominant as Max Verstappen has been in Formula One, but he is certainly on track to become one of the all-time greats in this sport, if he's not already. Like you mentioned, Kobe, winning the Indianapolis 500 last year was really the last check mark that he had to check off on his list, and everything else is just gravy after this. But I know that he's excited to come back and make a statement and go for that third championship as well. Let's talk about Ganassi for a second, because this was a topic on the roundtable show as well. With 5 full-time entries this year, maybe the resources being spread too thin over at Ganassi. And again, 6th place, hardly a bad result for Alex Palou. But again, when you factor in just how dominant he was last year, 8th place being his worst result all season. And I think for Scott Dixon, it was something similar, like 7th being his worst result all year, if you disregard a DNF or two that he might have had. To be 6th and 9th today, I think respectively, not a very good indicator of where you want to be. If you want to be fighting Josef Newgarden for a championship, you're going to have to do a little bit better than that. So, guys like Linus Lundqvist and Kiffin Simpson, obviously still very young and just starting out learning these cars. Maybe you're not quite expecting them to compete for wins and podiums on a weekly basis yet. Marcus Armstrong still getting used to this series as well. But for the Alex Palous and Scott Dixons of the world, it's tough to be satisfied with a result like this today. So, I'd have to say a little bit surprised, not totally shocked though, given what we talked about having to spread your resources among 5 full-time entries. It's going to take some time, I think, for Ganassi to get used to that and what the dynamic is going to be with him and team. Hopefully, for Palou and Dixon's sake, they can figure that out and maybe provide a championship contending performances for those 2 cars as we move on here in 2024.
And another stat I wanted to point out that NBC brought up today, which is still surprising to me after all these years, but Scott Dixon has never won on the streets of St. Pete. I think that is really crazy that that he has never won this season opening race. And overall, I thought Ganassi might have something today with Palou and Dixon, but as we saw throughout the day, this was really a race all about track position. It was very difficult to overtake out there today on the streets of St. Pete. And I think this one race, not necessarily an indication of what Chip Ganassi racing has for this year. I think we need to get a few races in and see if adding that 5th entry for Kiffin Simpson is going to end up taking resources away from the other cars, but for Alex Palou, been able to salvage a 6th place finish, that's something to be happy about. And it was really surprising that he wasn't able to advance in qualifying. And like I said, this race is all about track position, and Palou didn't have the track position, so it was very difficult for him to move up through the field today. He would have needed, like a caution to come out at the right time, and then try to gain the track position that way. But it just never really worked out for Palou today. But still, overall, a good points day. And we'll see where to go the next time, the IndyCar has a points race. No, the next race is going to be a non-points race, the IndyCar All-Star race at the Thermal Club. And now I'm going to look at a driver who overperformed today, Santino Ferrucci, ended up getting an 11th place finish. But remember, Team Penske now has an alliance with AJ Foyt Racing, and Ferrucci's teammate Stingray Robb retired from the race after 33 laps. Not a great day for him. Could Santino's performance be an indicator of the potential improvement this year due to the alliance?
Yeah, I think so. Again, I'm sure Santino Ferrucci would love to be even higher than 11th place. I think that, he recognizes, especially with how well he's run at the Indy 500, that, a long-term goal for the team would be to be able to fight for top spots on a more regular basis. But, given where Foyt has been in the last several years, really being a backmarker team, it's kind of ironic, when you think of a great champion and the all-time leader in race wins in AJ Foyt and the team that bears his name, you wouldn't associate that name with running at the back of the pack, but that's really been the reality for AJ Foyt Racing in recent years. To be, solidly in the midfield right now with Santino Ferrucci, I think is a good step forward. And, maybe a sign with this alliance with Team Penske, who of course dominated the weekend with Josef Newgarden. It's certainly a good step forward, but I think there's still obviously room to continue to grow from here. And hopefully for Santino Ferrucci, the Foyt team can continue to take those steps as we move on here in 24.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure Santino Ferrucci and that number 14 team have to be really excited to finish 11th today, because I'm sure a lot of people didn't expect this number 14 squad to finish this high up. It was Santino ran a really smart race, kept the car clean, and ended up getting a great result today. And we'll see if they'll be able to build that consistency throughout the season. And overall, just a really good day for Ferrucci. And then Adam Limmery says you got to give a call to Felix Rosenquist, a solid race for Meyershank Race. And absolutely, Felix was really great all weekend. One of the biggest surprises of the weekend, in my opinion. And now, Ben, thinking back to our roundtable episode, the comical battle of mid, Jackson with Will Power versus Alex with Colton Herta. Will Power finished fourth, while Colton Herta took fifth place. So in theory, Alex is more accurate at the moment. Both drivers got top five finishes. Is this really a surprise, or more along your belief that while not a flashy performance today, they're still contenders for the championship?
Yeah, well, I think those two might have been watching the roundtable show as well. I still can't get over. That's the closest I've ever come to actually walking off the camera here after Jackson made his comment about Will Power, and even Alex about Colton Herta as well. I think, again, not nearly as egregious of a take when you consider the great champion and race winner that Will Power's proven to be over his career. But, for those two to finish in the top five today, of course, Newgarden was just in a completely different zip code, but the battle beyond, I was listening to a race on the radio, actually, as I was driving back from Delaware today. And one of the commentators actually said, no disrespect to Newgarden, but you almost wish he stayed home today, because otherwise we would have had a great battle for the win with Ward and McLaughlin, who was my pick a winner, and then Power and Herta right behind as well. Some great talent and great drivers up there in the mix, in the fight for second at least. And I think proving that, Will Power still has it. He may have gone winless last year, but that was obviously an anomaly. I think he's going to get a couple of wins this year, and Colton Herta certainly has the speed if he can just make it to the end of a race and put these good finishes together. So again, I think the two main championship protagonists as of right now are still Josef Newgarden and Alex Palou, but you can certainly never count out Will Power. And if Colton Herta can again make it to the end of the races and continue to hold on to these top spots, which he's capable of getting in qualifying, and in terms of his pace where he would be, I think he could be a championship contender as well. So these two being in the comical battle of mid, as we called it on the roundtable show, I think is still entirely inaccurate. I hesitate to take a victory lap after just one race, but I think the two of them still have a lot to prove this year, and I think they showed it today.
Absolutely. I don't think Will Power or Colton Herta are mid at all. Will Power showed today, despite getting up there in age, he's still one of the best in the series, just like Scott Dixon is. And Colton Herta, he just needs the car to stay in one piece, and he needs to keep the car in one piece as well and make it to the end of these races. It seems like with Colton Herta, something has happened with the car mechanically. And then on the other hand, he's like making a mistake and costing them a good finish. But I think Colton Herta cleans up those mistakes. He can certainly get back up there in the championship conversation as well. And by Will Power standard, he just happened to have a down 2023 season, and based on his run today, could be an indication. We could see Will Power standing on the top step of the podium once again. Thought both of these drivers had really great races. And if you don't have anything else more to add to the IndyCar section, Ben, I believe we'll move on with our MotoGP recap.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Pecco Bagnaia, what a statement on that first opening lap. It looked like Jorge Martin, who had a great start, was going to run away with this win. But Pecco Bagnaia even made some heavy contact with Brad Binder, still was able to get towards the front and just control this race. Big statement from the two-time MotoGP World Champion. I think overall he has a good opportunity to just really make this message loud and clear to everyone, including Jorge Martin, who won the sprint race, that if you want the championship, he's the one to beat. Ducati overall looking pretty good. Marc Marquez, 4th place. He was thrilled. Everyone saying he is back. Now that he has that Ducati equipment, he looks like he's somebody to watch all year long. But overall, Pedro Acosta, what a debut race. That was phenomenal what he was able to get done today in his debut. Very excited to see what this young kid can do overall. We're going to have a little bit of a break before the next MotoGP race weekend, but overall, very excited with what I saw at Qatar. I don't think we're going to see a full pull away from Ducati. KTM, they're looking strong. Brad Binder looking great. But Jack Miller crashing out. At what point are we going to say Jack Miller needs to clean up, start crashing less, start finishing the races more, and getting those valuable points, especially for the constructors? KTM, I think they could start putting pressure on Jack Miller that if he's not finishing these races, he could be out of a seat. And one of the big things too, Fabio Quartararo, we mentioned on the pre-race show, him, Yamaha, what's going to happen with that? 11th place points, that's great. But overall, I think you're going to see those rumors start to pick up if we keep seeing these mid-pack runs, not a whole lot of a drastic performance upgrade each and every week. I think you're going to be seeing those rumors picking up week after week after week to the point where is Fabio Quartararo going to turn up? So it's really going to be interesting to see what happens.
Thank you for that recap, Joe. Yeah, real interesting race this weekend in MotoGP. Another Pecco Bagnaia win. Should not be surprised by that. But the interesting thing is going to be figuring out Fabio Quartararo's future, because he is not happy at Yamaha right now. So there could be a potential silly season change on the horizon there. And we're almost out of time for the night. So, Ben, we're going to do our one shining moment. We encourage everyone in the chat room. Please let us know what's one moment that stood out to you the most from this racing weekend. So, Ben, what's your grid one shining moment?
You know, forgive me for taking the easiest one, but I guess the biggest shining moment from the weekend has to be Oliver Bearman, obviously. I mean, one of the most impressive debuts I've seen in a long time. And, you know, I got to say, I am frequently impressed by, you know, drivers, reserve drivers, if you will, who get the call-ups. You know, Nick de Vries scoring points, you know, for Williams at Monza. Paul di Resta getting the call-up for Felipe Massa several years ago when he was the Williams reserve driver. And Toto Wolff even saying, you know, he was impressed by how quickly he was able to get up to speed. Of course, George Russell subbing for Lewis Hamilton at Shakir in 2020 and arguably should have won that race. You know, obviously that was a little different since Russell, you know, was a full-time driver for Williams at the time. But, you know, I am frequently amazed at how quickly these drivers are able to take a very difficult situation, very last-minute call-up, and make the most out of it and come home with a good haul of points. I mean, Oliver Bearman, like we mentioned on tonight's show, he's in the top 10 in Formula One points now. Obviously, we don't expect him to stay there as the season goes on, given his day job as being a Formula 2 driver. But a fantastic result for him. And I have to say, great to see Carlos Sainz. I think, 24 hours after his surgery, he was back in the paddock supporting his team on race day. So hopefully he's off to a quick recovery and we can see him back in the car when it comes time for Australia. But in the meantime, you know, you always wish it was under better circumstances. But what a debut for Oliver Bearman. That has to be the one shining moment from this weekend.
Yeah, Oliver Bearman is probably going to be most people's one shining moment this weekend, but I'm going to go with a different one. I'm going to go with one that Adam mentioned in the chat, Felix Rosenqvist, Meyer-Shank race. And I know in the round table, you know, I know you, especially you, Ben, you were saying that you thought Helio Castroneves would win the Indy 500, you know, and that would be, you know, it'll be basically their sole win of the year. After seeing how Felix Rosenqvist, maybe Felix Rosenqvist might be one of the Meyer-Shank drivers to go to victory lane. Tom Blomqvist is, you know, I thought he had a nice, respectable race today. Still learning how to handle these Indy cars, but Felix Rosenqvist, he was one of my biggest surprises of the IndyCar race weekend. I did not expect to see him up there, you know, battling the big dogs at the NTT INDYCAR Series in that Meyer-Shank car, especially, you know, since the program kind of took a step back last year, you know, with Helio Castroneves and Simon Pagenaud behind the wheel throughout the year. And for Felix Rosenqvist and the number 60 team to hit the ground running as strong as they did in St. Pete, I think that's a really good sign of things to come. And Felix might pop off a win and, you know, get some really good finishes throughout the year. I think Meyer-Shank Racing has to be very happy with how they've started off the 2024 season.
Yeah, great shining moment for sure. I got to say, I thought he had a shot at the pole position with how he was running yesterday. And then, of course, you know, a very strong result today as well and showing a lot of speed. Great pick for one shining moment there as well, Kobe. And that's going to wrap it up for tonight's show. Thank you all for sticking with us tonight. And a big thanks, as always, most of all, to our Patreon investors, Colin, Deshelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew. Your support means the world to us. It's what allows us to continue to grow this motorsports media outlet that we have here at Grid Network. You too can invest in our programming here if you like what you saw tonight by clicking on the link in the video description. Or if you'd rather make a one-time investment instead, you can do so through Buy Me a Coffee or YouTube Super Chats. $10 through either of those outlets, and we will mail you some Grid Network stickers as well if you join our Patreon. And be sure to subscribe if you can't support us financially. The most important thing right now, help us on our journey to 1,000 subscribers. You see it there on the bottom of your screen, scrolling past now. We are so close to that goal. So thank you so much for those that have subscribed. If you haven't, be sure you do, and hit the bell icon as well so that you're notified every time we upload a new video or host a new show. Tomorrow, I will be back with Brandon Crossland and Josh, who you saw on the show tonight as well. We'll recap Formula 2 in Saudi Arabia. Indy Next having their debut weekend in St. Pete as well. And, of course, the Phoenix weekend over in NASCAR and ARCA. On Wednesday, Kobe will be back with Josh and Matt White for Grid Tonight. Thursday, I'll be on the air with Isha and Joe for Women in Motorsports. And then we'll do it all again on Saturday with Grid Live pre-race and wrap up to follow on Sunday, encore on Monday as the cycle continues. And then on April 7th, stay tuned. The annual grid ranking and the EPI will come out later in April as well. For Kobe Lambeth, for Joshua Birch and Nicole Fry, I'm Ben Schneider. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Have a good night, everyone.